Hi, I am Seemanti Chaterjee from Department of Zoology, Bethune College. Today I am going to deliver my lecture on an overview of biological invasion, a threat to biodiversity. Let's move on the topic. My topic covers an overview of biological invasions in accordance with the following points. That is, what is bioinvasion or biological invasion? What are called invaders or invasive species and when they are become invasive? How biodiversity relates with the invasion process? How invaders or invasive species is becoming a threat to biodiversity? And finally, a little about their management. So first of all, I would like to describe what is bioinvasion or biological invasion. Sir Charles Elton, the full name of Sir Charles Elton is Sir Charles Sutherland Elton, in the year 1958 first used the term biological invasion. Within time, he observed that biological invasion is so frequent in the continents and oceans as well as in the islands also, and he within time try to understand the invasion process by this invasive species, or why the species become invasive, and try to understand the outcome of the global invasion. And he assumed that the invasion would result in the homogenization of floral as well as the faunal species. So his observation comes with certain facts. Like he told that biological invasion is a natural phenomenon. Here one can observe a range expansion of cryptogenic species, that is the species from the uncertain or unknown origin, or simply the range expansion of species to the new areas. Sometimes it is from the known origin also. And the species which comes from the unknown or the known origin to the new geographical area have multitude of terms like non-native, exotics, aliens, non-indigenous, introduced, naturalized and invasives. Generally, the terms are not same, but there are few terms like non-native, exotic, alien, indigenous are showing a synonymous meaning. Like here, these four terms refers to the species that just enters in a geographical area and is being cultivated or captivated. Then the introduced species are the species lives in the wild and they are outside the human control. Likewise, the naturalized species are the species like introduced who are also surviving in the wild, or they are also called the feral species and also without human support. And finally, the invasive species, they are invasive and as well as the unique species because of their different, or we can say they are discrete characters that made this invasive group different from the other groups. Finally, I want to show that there are in modern biological invasion, basically there are a main reason which is basically human mediated reason. There is a human mediated disappearance of biogeographical barriers. So as we all know that we are living in a civilized era, right? So there are improvement of transportation, there are improvement of trades, and all improvement because of the human interference. So for this the biological barriers are declining so fast, and this in recent era is a main the preliminary cause for the biological invasion across the globe. Now, before moving to the invasive species, I am trying to introduce the native species, which is also called the indigenous species. And these species, whatever effects we observed by the invaders, these are all on the native species. So before moving to the invasive species, we are now introducing the native species. So these species are also having certain characters, like they are also called indigenous species, normally lives in and occupy a particular community. Maximum biological interactions are observed between the native species, be it a flora, be it a fauna, or other organisms. And these species have natural predators also, and thereby they are also maintaining their population. As we talk about the talk on the invasive species, native species. So we can say that there are numerous number of native species that spread across the world, and it is quite impossible to take account each and every native species in detail. So here I just to give an idea, here I am going to share some of the pictures of native species, floral and faunal. So these are the faunal species, these are the floral species. So this is the bicolored frog, native to India, endemic to Western Ghat. This is a picture of rhino native to Indian subcontinent and also spread along Indus, Ganges and Brahmaputra river. Also spread in Bangladesh, southern parts of Nepal and Bhutan, and in the southern China and Indo-China. So these are the region where these rhinos are native. This is the picture of male and female bird called the regional bird of paradise, and these birds are exclusively native for the island of Papua New Guinea and its surrounding areas. Now here come the floral species. So this is a unique flora of the region Socotra, Yemen in Indian Ocean, and this is called as the Socotra tree or Socotra dragon tree or dragon blood tree. Then Blumia and Cascabala, we all know these two species are native to India. So these are some examples of native flora and fauna. Now moving to the invasive species. According to CBD, or we can say the Convention on Biological Diversity, invasives are also called the invasive alien species, and according to the CBD, they defines the invasives like species those introduction and or spread outside their natural past or present distribution threatens biological diversity. So this definition focuses two things. One, the species should come from a new geographical range, and number two, when they establish to a new geographical range, they basically threatens the biological diversity. This invasive species or invasive alien species have also certain traits, like they have profuse growth, they have high dispersal ability, they spread aggressively outside its native range, they have ability to thrive on other plants, specifically native plant species. They have high physiological adaptability, they have phenotypic plasticity or morphological adaptability as well, and finally they have ability to cope with a wide range of environmental conditions. So like natives, there are lot more invasive species nowadays. So here are some glimpses of it. So these four are the floral species, these four are the faunal invaders. So among the floral species, Lantana Parthenium oxalis are very well known noxious terrestrial invasive weed in India, whereas this Pisthia is known as the aquatic invaders in India. Among the faunal species, the giant American toad, native to India, endemic to Western Ghats, and this is actually this is native to South and mainland Central America, but primarily invasive to Florida and US, and now it is also invasive to Australia also. Then the European rabbit, this is first introduced to Australia in 1800. Now it became invasive in Australia. Nile perch, it is invasive in the Great Lakes of Africa, Lake Victoria. And the wild pigs, This is native to Eurasia and North America. A subspecies of this wild pig known as Sus scrofa cristatus is also known as Andamanese pig or Mupin pig, is a subspecies of wild boar which is native to India. But however, in it is this wild pig actually the most invasive terrestrial mammals worldwide. Now, I am going to explain why the species become invasive, or when, specifically when the species become invasive. So, here are some invasion stages. And when a species is, have showing their expansion from a new geographical range to another geographical range, so transportation is one of the main tool for it. So once a species is transported to a new area, after that they are trying to introduce. After introduction, some population are introduced itself successfully, and some maybe die because of some unfavorable conditions. And after introduction, the establishment process, after introducing, some of the introduced species are try to establish their population, and other are failed. Actually, 10% of the introduced species are became established and spread further. And when they are successfully established, they spread in their further region and try to impact on the native biota or native floral and faunal species. Sometimes the impact is low and sometimes the impact may be high depending on the ability of the species spread. So, contemplating the major impact of these invaders or these invasive species, they are considering the second leading threat to biodiversity loss by Mollett et al. 2017. And there are other direct or indirect factors that are helping in the increasing number and spread of invasive alien species are globalization, climate change and urbanization. All three factors are basically human mediated factors. Now I am going to describe or try to narrate how biodiversity relates with the invasion process. So for that, we have to know what is biodiversity. So simply we can say that biodiversity is a biological diversity or the diversity of species that lives on earth, be it any species. So additionally, patterns of the biodiversity helps us to understand the community of the structure. It means the variety of species in a community or an ecosystem. And finally here, the species I refer is a collection of both natives and invasive species. The species richness I refer specifically here is a combination of both natives and the invasive species present in a specified area. Now we may wonder why maintaining this species richness is important. Why? As we all know that each and every species has an function in the ecosystem to maintain the ecological balance, as ecosystem is very dynamic in nature, and it has diverse of species which are interconnected. This picture beautifully showed how the species are interconnected and species are depending on each other for food and energy, and there is always a natural succession is going on. So thus sustaining a stable balance in the ecosystem through the number of each species is very important. So where there is good number of species, we can say there exists biodiversity, and that ultimately showed the health of the ecosystem as well. So a good number of species or species richness means there is a good health showing the ecosystem. Now I am showing you through this graph a pattern of biodiversity through the increasing time. So here are some contrasting factors. The green color showed the factors that promotes the biodiversity over the time, and the orange colors arrow showed the factors that contributes to the loss of the biodiversity. So the contrasting factors. So uh, uh, in recent era, we can say that the biodiversity is affecting greatly, and this biodiversity is basically affected by whom? Affected by human, through many ways, like habitat loss, habitat disturbance, habitat fragmentation, destruction, introduction of exotic species to an area, over exploitation, population, climate change, and all these are the products of increasing urbanization. And this is the prime human mediated interference in modern days. So one should stop that, and if one should stop the decline in the biodiversity over the time period, we should encourage the factors that promotes the biodiversity, like restoration of the species in a particular area, sustainable use of the species in a particular area, and so on. As the invasive species or invasive alien species very impactful in the nature. So how it impacts? It can be it can homogenize biotic community. It may outcompete native flora. It alters the soil properties. It exerts huge economic loss. Like there are some pictures which through which we can show how an invader species homogenize a landscape in Western Canada. How a presence of exotic plant species in a soil changes the soil properties, like changes the soil faunal composition, or changes the soil microbial composition, changes the soil chemical properties, like increasing soil organic carbon, increasing soil nitrogen, soil phosphorus, and so on. This is some pictures showing some case studies where the invasives directly impacted the native species. Like in the first picture, this is a picture of water hyacinth, Iconia crassipis, the scientific name of water hyacinth. So this picture showed how water hyacinth invade the pond and stop the any other native species to grow over there. This is a picture of sugarcane area, sugarcane agricultural land. So the sugarcane land is damaged by one of the destructive invasive animal, that is invasive feral pigs. These two are the pictures of Mycenia micrantha invasion in the forest as they are climbing in nature, and in the urban habitat as they have also ground cover. Finally, this is the picture where we can show that evil weevil larvae, how affected the young leaves of pineapple. So this is how constantly invaders are impacted natives in different parts of the world. Here are some fact sheets where I am trying to show you how naturalized species become invasives. So in this slide, basically those species are introduced by humans purposefully, like Asian carp. These are imported to US in 1970 as a method to control the nuisance algal bloom in the wastewater treatment plant, and as well as for human food. But within 10 years, what we observe is the carp escaped from the confinement area and spread to the waters of the Mississippi River basin and the other large rivers and become invasive. Next, a floral species, Lantana camera, which is very much intentionally introduced in Australia as ornamental plant in 1841, which spread and escaped domestic cultivation and become established in the wild within 20 years. And they brought to the India by the British around 200 years ago, which then spread and become invasive as well in this area. It is invasive in India also. Next, one of the subspecies of honeybee, that is Apis mellifera scutella, in 1950s these species were brought into Brazil with a plan of breeding purpose for commercial honeybees, increase production. But unfortunately, African queens escaped from the experimental apiary before the breeding program was completed, and it spread across the South America into Central to North America, and finally become a predator and invasive one. And finally, the Vespa velutina, the hornet, one of the live hornets. Intentionally or unintentionally illegal transportation of this species for the purpose of food and use for traditional medicine was done earlier. Their nests containing larvae and pupae are also harvested and sold. Sometimes they are their accidental introduction can be observed by international freight, and sometimes they are accidentally introduced also, like as they have accidentally introduced into France. So this is how the naturalized species become invasive. So why should we care for the invaders? Because the number of invasive species, if increasing, there will be a huge economic costs regarding their management. Estimated damage and cost control of invasive species in the US are huge, almost $138 billion annually. There are several invaders which constantly affected the agricultural land. One of the example is the Mycenia micrantha. They are reported that they affected the banana plantation greatly in different parts of the world. So we should control them. But how? So we should control them in accordance with the stages of the invasion. When there is early stages of invasion, like when there is introduction, there is just a release of these species into the natural environment, we should prevent them. We should eradicate if possible. Then the establishment phase come. In the establishment phase, we should eradicate if possible and control it through that, and prevent their further introduction. Finally, when they proliferate, when invasion starts through spreading, when they are abundant through their increasing nature, then if eradicate is possible, do that, or there are other options to which I will come later. And finally, when invasion starts, when these species are threatening to the biodiversity and threatening to the conservation values also, then one should deliberately throw them out from their invasion range. So it is very clear that if the invasion process or invasion, if we prevent the invasive species at their very early stage, the effectiveness will be high and the cost management will be low. And if the opposite happens, the effectiveness will be low and the cost management will be high. Now moving to some control measures of invasive alien species. There are three basic control measures. One is physical control, where directly removing species by hand and other appropriate machines are used. Then chemical control, where it involves use of herbicides, insecticides, rodenticides, and primarily affect the target species, and it also include the integrated pest management policy. Finally, the biological control, where intentional use of populations of natural enemies of the target invasive alien species was used. There are other control or managing options. One of the helpful or utilizing managing options is the alternative use of these invaders, which are very noxious indeed. Like Iconia crassipes are used as biogas, biofuel production, medicinal functions, vermicomposting, compost production, or bioremediation. Like Asian carps was also used in aquaculture to control the algal bloom as they feed upon it. And also there are several reports where we can see that there are a large number of invader species like lantana, mycenia, parthenium, ricinus, euphorbia. All are used for food and medicinal purposes. So, what can we do to help? We should prevent the introduction of these species or introduction of new species by doing some strategies, like we do not release any aquatic pets or plants in any open environment, number one. Number two, clean your boat before transferring to a new water body. Fishing using native bait when possible. And more importantly, try to identify the invasive species. How to identify? I will come to the next slide. I will tell you that. And report any sighting of the invasive species wherever and whenever you found it. So yes, this is the sources where you can identify the native species. Here are some online sites. Here are some books which will help you to identify and give you ideas on invaders or different types of invasive species all over the world. I almost reached at the concluding part of my talk, and finally, I want to say that invasion biology nowadays is an emerging field of research. Almost past 40 to 50 years, 1980 onwards, this field becomes this discipline is began to emerge, and there are fundamental and applied research directions in the field of invasion biology is going on. Here are some fields of related to fundamental research, and here are some field related to applied research. And being an invasion biologist, I must say that recent researches are very knowledgeable to us, to the general public, to know about the invasive species and the invasion process across the globe, and about their management and different angles related to invasive species. So yes, invasion biology nowadays a very emerging field of research. Finally, I want to acknowledge the officer in charge, Madam Dr. Anushila Hajra Bhattacharya, Bethune College, and the organizing committee of the Tuesday lecture for giving me this opportunity. I'd like to thank all the faculty members of my Department of Zoology. I would like to thank my supervisor for her guidance. I'd like to thank my husband specially for helping me with some scientific inputs and helping me to make the presentation, and finally some image credits. And this is my take home message. I would like to say all of you that please, after listening my talk, if you feel that invasive species is really harmful and really creating a threat to the native biota, then please stop the spread of invasive species. Thank you very much for your patience listening.